Have you wondered why there are so many Irish judges in the world? In New York, many of the police force are of Irish descent. The Supreme Court has many Irish judges. The name Dan of one of the tribes of ancient Israel means judge, and that goes way back to coming out of Israel when a tribe called Dan led three of the future nations, the 12 tribes of Israel, out of Egypt. No one messed with Dan. In the battles that Israel fought, they distinguished themselves. 3,000 years later, Winston Churchill gave them credit for withstanding British rule for so many years. One half of Dan escaped a national captivity by sailing to Ireland. The other half of Dan, that you will find on a Bible map, went to the north to claim more territory, and they went into a national captivity with the rest of the northern 10 tribes of Israel. They were dragged up to the Caucasus and the Caspian Sea, and when they were released from that captivity, they headed west into Denmark. Dan's mark, the mark of Dan. They left a trail behind them, such as the Danube River. When they came to Ireland, they spread their name around Ireland and even in Scotland. Donegal and Donaghadee and Dublin. Ireland's loaded with the name Dan. And it's no wonder that when the Danes reached the nation up there in Denmark, they came down and occupied Ireland because they knew they were the same people. And they ruled Ireland and northern England for the longest time. The Pictish people were settled up there. They governed them and were responsible for bringing them to the Yucatan Peninsula. And that's another story. But Dan has always resisted anyone's occupation. And the reason that the British have stayed there so long is that Ireland is known as England's back door. And had the Nazi battalions arrived in Ireland and were allowed to cross into the west coast of England, the outcome of World War II would have been much different. If you remember the story of Joseph's coat of many colors, that was actually plaid, tartan. Most people don't know that the Scottish and Irish plaids are tartans, the chiefs are chieftains, and if you're a school teacher, there's a thread sewn in for a school teacher. The coat that Joseph received from his father denoted the fact that he was to be the head of Israel after his father's death. And of course, his brothers sold him into slavery, and you know the rest of that story. But as Joseph became prime minister of Egypt and Israel finished up down there for food, and father Jacob came down there, who was named Israel, he blessed Joseph's two sons, and he crossed his hands and blessed them with the wealth of the world. And one of them was to become a great company of nations. That was the British Empire. Very few people realize that it was carried all the way down there. Actually, the English are nephews to the Irish people. But I have a warning for the Irish people because I've lived in the US for so long. I meet so many Americans who have been to Ireland and visited their relatives there, and they tell me that the Irish people really have a hatred for the British. So I want to tell you, in love for the Irish people, that through remaining members of the European Union, that you will soon have your opportunity to take revenge against the British people as a united force against England. Please be warned that the British are your relatives, part of Israel, and that God does not look favorably on the actions that you will take. Please remember that Oliver Cromwell also had the British king executed. He was a real bastard to the Irish people, and how half of the entire population of Ireland was starved out by two potato famines when other crops were shipped to England. But I also can tell you, after having worked in England for many years, as many of the Irish have, and they will agree that the English person has no hatred or animosity against the Irish. And in fact, the Irish working in England would much prefer an English foreman over an Irish one, because the Irish foremen make them work twice as hard. So please remember, don't bear any grudges to the point where you cut off food supplies to Britain, or to the point you allow a European army to land on Irish soil in order to occupy England. You have no good reason to be a part of what Germany is going to do to the British people with a nuclear holocaust against the British cities and the loss of 1/3 of British lives. Remember this.